Race number 6 on the card at Pukekohe is Trelawney Stud Championship Stakes over the 2100 metres for the 3-year-old Steve. And this Springstone, I'm looking forward to this race. This is a nice field.
Yeah, nice field. A lot of these horses now have had at least one run over ground, in particular at Aupuni in the Classic. Hold the Bourbon is one horse that bucks that trend. First time over ground, $3.80 off a Shortner of $3.50. Pinarello at $4.20, being backed and clearly the best lead I can give early doors. Holds 4 times more money than the current fave. Ruark bouncing between $5.50 and $6.50, trading 6. Achieve $7.50 out of 4.8.5. Titled at 8 out of point to $9. St. Bathans $10 flat, hasn't budged since the opening call. Lingjin Zongfeng 14 and a couple of points here to 12. And then a little bit of a gap, the second division, Rocket Lad the Maidener, 31 to 21 spec, best of the rest is Soldier Boy at a $26 price. So a little bit of specking for 2 or 3 in that Middleton market, Thaddeus, but best back runner sits with number 2 in Pinarello.
Yeah, they keep backing Pinarello now, Pops. 5th last time out, obviously over ground, first run since a derby, but gee, Hold the Bourbon has been impressive.
He has been, and this is another division of 3-year-old horses, and maybe the late bloomers, you could say, with horses that weren't quite ready for either an Oaks or a Derby in their preparation, had that opportunity. And we see a lot of horses here that have gone sort of 14, 1600 and now to 2100 metres. For instance, Hold the Bourbon and Tilted, who ran over ground last time. Ruark, all these sort of new wave, late wave of 3-year-olds that are getting towards this race. And then who knows what will happen beyond this if they look at a trip towards maybe Brisbane or even South Australia possibly for some of these runners with Derby and Oaks in those 2 states. And then St. Bathans, again, same sort of category, a horse who's looked really good so far in a returning preparation over those type of distances of 1400 metres and 1600 metres. And then on the other side of that coin, you still have some horses that competed in the Derby and Oaks. You've got Pinarello, who finished 5th in the New Zealand Derby. You've got Soldier Boy, who ran 4th in the New Zealand Derby. And you've got Achieve, who's competed in her last 5 starts, all in black type company with her last run in the New Zealand Oaks. So which way do you go? Do you go with horses that are having a new preparation and are peaking towards this race? Or do you look at horses that have performed throughout the year and have run in some of our better races? That's the sort of dilemma we have. Hold the Bourbon brings the form lines of looking very impressive in a new campaign. You can understand why he's favourite, but you can also start probably working around horses like Pinarello and Achieve as very much notable dangers in the race if they bring their best form through Derbies and Oaks.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, Steve, a lot of viewers out there and maybe even myself maybe would have thought Pinarello might have been opening favourite in this race after what we've seen. You've gone with Hold the Bourbon. Run us through your thought process.
Well, just on Pinarello, we know he had the complications leading into the Manawatu Classic. I think he got a tooth knocked out leading into the race and had to be late scratched. But the stable have bounced out of that drama a few weeks back and saying the horse is flying. So you've got to respect that alone. We did see early money for it leading into the Aupuni Classic on the Manawatu Classic before being scratched. And it was a little bit soft on race day, and I feel that's where the trend will be around number 2. Early money Thursday, Friday, and early doors Saturday. That important 10 minutes leading into the race. I reckon it will just be lukewarm Pinarello, and just depending how big the liability is around Pinarello come up to race start, how much it drifts in that last 10 minutes. But just on exposed form, when you go back to its rating 65 win over 2-1 at Ellerslie, it just rated fair, 1.6 lengths below par for Pinarello. With the weight adjustment, he had to carry a big weight on that day. He still ran about 2.5 lengths off the best figures in this race. So he's got to improve, but as I say, the stable are very confident leading in. He's flying in terms of track work. When it comes to Hold the Bourbon, you go back to its previous run over 1,600 metres. It was a real sit and sprint affair. To the 600, 63.64 was 12.5 lengths below par. So it really did suit horses on the speed, which Hold the Bourbon was situated on speed. The last 600, 34.92, which was 5.8 lengths above par. So he's got that turn of foot, Hold the Bourbon, which we saw in his maiden win at Mudda Mudda. His last 400 and 200 was the quickest of the meeting. The overall rating for the 3-year-old 16 was 1.3 lengths above par, but when normalised to the Manawatu Classic and the figures that were produced in the key lead-up form line, he needs to improve 2 lengths. But in my opinion, his ceiling, Hold the Bourbon, is very high, and we've got nowhere near it. So that improvement, it's definitely there, but the only query about this horse And you've got to respect the stable again because they're looking at the races like the Derby over in Queensland, his first time over ground. But he's got that turn of foot, and yeah, it's just wondering how fast they're going to go out in this race. I don't see a huge amount of speed in this race, so it could be quite tactical. And again, he's got a bit of a sticky gate from barrier 10, but
Yeah. So what you're saying is sometimes you bring that art into play with those figures you're producing. You do sometimes have to think about the art of ratings and where the ceiling might be for a Hall the Bourbon.
Absolutely. It's particularly when you've got small sample size. A lot of these 3-year-olds, they've got nowhere near their ceiling. Some of them might have peaked, and we've seen the best of them, but a few of them have only had a handful of starts. You look at Hall the Bourbon, it's only had the 5 starts. It's had the 2 starts this campaign. So you just got to judge how much progression this horse has got, and I think it's got a stack of progression. It can easily match the PBs that have the Ruarks, the Achieves, the likes of Pinarellos. I think it can measure up clearly, even though it just hasn't had the chance to in terms of being on the turf or the Bourbon. But the slight query is first time over a ground, where you look at a lot of its rivals that they've had that they've had that grounding, they've had that run over 2,000 metres at Manawatu. They've had Derby runs over 2,400. They've had Oaks Achieves have run in Oaks. So a lot of these horses have had a nice foundation heading into this event where Hall the Bourbon. It's just got a little bit of a query first time over a trip, but he's definitely got that turn of foot. And again, he's got a bit of a sticky gate, so not sure where he maps.
Okay, Paul, what are your thoughts here? You're with the tried and true to a degree, or do you see Hall the Bourbon stepping up here?
Well, I was listening to SENZ this morning, and they had Stephen Marsh on.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he labelled Hall the Bourbon as his best bet this Saturday. He's got a number of very, very good runners going around as well, but I'm pretty sure he
Packing
mentioned
Joy?
And indeed, our Vencedor.
That wasn't his best, no? Okay, yeah. No, yeah, okay. That's an interesting race to pick it out in.
Yeah, so he did mention he'd be taking a few across to Queensland to grab some of that Aussie dollar. Anyway, I had a look at it, and you can understand why Hall the Bourbon and Pinarello are at the top of the market there. But I don't mind the look of a couple a wee bit further down. Ruak, I thought that runner-up over 2,000 metres last time has got him primed for this one. And the maiden victory over the mile at Counties. There's a couple of runners that come out of that race and gone on to win. Divine Sava and Holston.
Yeah, yes.
Who was, I thought there was an eye-catching run by Holston when came out and won last time. So a bit of form, Frank, there for Ruak. And I like St. Bathans. $10 currently. Had a couple of good wins and then placed behind Hall the Bourbon. Comes into this a kilo better off against Hall the Bourbon. So St. Bathans certainly in there.
Are you nervous about it having a tendency to over-race, St. Bathans?
Yeah.
He's done that a couple of times early doors.
If Grillsy can get him to settle.
Yeah, and he probably didn't have the chance to settle at Alpine. He comes out of Hall the Bourbon race, which I touched on. It was a sit and sprint affair. So you can, on that effect, be a domino effect where horses do over-race because they've absolutely walked and then sprinted home. So
you'd say the 2,000 wouldn't be a problem for St. Bathans on paper.
And pedigree.
If he can settle,
being
obviously.
by Maurice and whatnot. Again, I don't see a huge amount of tempo, so it'll be interesting to see how the horse settles in that important stage mid-race when they're all in final position and the pace does slacken. Because I do see a little bit of a concern around a genuine tempo here, and it may be below par. So that's the only query I had around about St. Bathans. Just has a tendency to over-race, which he may have the pedigree all day to stay, but if he doesn't settle in running, he'll be his own worst enemy come the concluding stages.
Yeah, okay. Interesting race, BP. I mean, we haven't even touched on Titled, Achieve. These are all live chances in a race like this.
They are. I think Steve's right around speed. We're just maybe hoping that one of the roughies that's sort of not exposed might be one of those horses that goes forward. Trust in You might be one of them. Soldier Boy, of course, eventually got to the front in the Vodafone New Zealand Derby. Down the back straight. Is he one of these horses at the bottom of the book, like a Novak or something else there that can possibly push forward just to provide a little bit of even tempo to the race, which is oh so crucial. Yeah, you're right. Tilted was terrific. I mean, this is a maiden galloper. Opie's aboard. Ran the fastest 8.64 and 2 in the Manawatu Classic, and if we're using that reference for some strong chances, the likes of Ruark and Co. Well, then maybe he has to be looked at, and maybe Ling Jung Feng as well. The same, ran the right sort of sectionals in that race, second fastest 8.64.2 or 8.64 in the Manawatu Classic. Look, in the end, I'm actually leaning towards Achieve, the 3-year-old filly. I've really been taken with what she's done through her New Zealand Oaks. Now she's dropping back from 2,400 to 2,100 metres. The Oaks was back in the 19th of March, but look, she's been so close up behind, Sunline Vars race and Bellatrix Black, and also in behind Self Obsession and Co. They're just form lines that you can respect and also gain, a little bit of confidence out of, that she's run strongly over a trip. So she was the one that I was leaning towards at a bit of a price. I think Hoard the Bourbon is the one that we have to be all scared of, though, because he just could be that new kid on the block. As I said at the start of this piece, he is the runner that comes with fresh form lines. He could be just too explosive. He just might be just his race on the weekend, Hoard the Bourbon, with how he comes into the race. You've heard there from Paul that Stephen Marsh believes he's the go-to for the weekend and maybe further afield. So they might have just got this bang on with where Hoard the Bourbon's at. It's just that unknown at this stage of him getting a trip, but he just could be too explosive for them if the race is run to his liking over the 2,100 metres. But yeah, I was sort of bouncing around Achieve and Pinarello, and Achieve on the each way, sort of sitting around $8.50. But if we're taking quaddies and all those sort of things, of course, we're not going to be leaving out Hoard the Bourbon and those type of horses.
No, you might need a few if you're going to go under the quaddie. Would you settle on Pops Likes Achieve each way, which I can certainly see? Where did you go?
Ruark at $6 and St. Bathans each way.
Okay, $6 Ruark, $10 St. Bathans each way. Let's see a bit of money for Rocket Lad, Steve. Maidener by preferment, but it looks like 2,000 is going to be no problem at all.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of maideners. Rocket Lad, as you mentioned, well played 31 to 21, entitled, just on title. When you look at the Manawatu Classic, the last 635, 31, 2.4 lengths above par. So it really did favour for horses at the first half of the field. Entitled was back in the last third. BP mentioned it closed the best sectionals last 6-4-2 splits and drew wide that day, so they automatically went back. It's got a gate here. Opie jumps on. I'm sure they'll be looking for at worst a neutral position titled, and just can't knock a couple of these maideners in this field. They've got upside.
It's an intriguing race. I'm looking forward to it. Paul with the St. Bathans and Ruark. BP each way Achieve, but watch out for Hoard the Bourbon. Stephen Marsh is bet of the weekend by all accounts.